My name is Samuel Thomas, 40-year-old from suburban Washington, D.C. I always thought my adoption was simple: loving parents, a stable home, no questions asked. But on my 40th birthday, one DNA test unraveled everything. Turns out, the woman who raised me wasn't my only mother. And the man who did raise me? He stole me, on purpose. Now I know the truth. And I'm about to burn everything down with it. Before we dive into this unbelievable true story of betrayal, stolen identity, and long-buried family secrets, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that cuts deep. Trust me, by the end, you won't look at family the same way again. Now, let's begin. Turning 40 wasn't supposed to feel like this. My wife had baked a German chocolate cake. My kids gave me a handmade card and 2 pairs of socks, one with tacos, one with tiny accountants holding calculators. Everyone laughed when I opened them. I smiled, I blew out the candles, I said thank you, but I couldn't stop thinking about the little white box sitting in my desk drawer. The DNA kit had been a gag gift from my brother-in-law, who thought I'd get a kick out of learning whether I was 2% Viking or part Neanderthal. You never know, he'd said with a wink, except I did know. Or thought I did. Adopted at 5 months old. No known history. Your birth mother wasn't able to keep you, was the only phrase I'd ever been given. It was vague, sanitized. A ribbon on a box no one wanted to open, but turning 40 made me wonder. About blood. About where my eyes came from. About who named me before someone changed it to Samuel. So I spit in the tube, sealed the package, and sent it off, just to see. I didn't expect anything, but 2 weeks later, I got the notification: you have a close family match. I opened the app, name, Marilyn Thomas, relationship, parent/child, confidence level, 99.99%. I stared at the screen. My heart went dead quiet. The name struck something deep. Familiar. I typed it into Facebook. There she was. Gray hair, wire glasses, floral church dresses. I recognized her instantly. She lived 4 blocks from my house. She had brought casseroles to our potlucks. Helped organize coat drives. Attended every church fundraiser. She'd known me my entire life, and never said a word. I scrolled through her photos. Nothing. No mention of children. Just a few pictures of her garden, her cat, and a 4th of July cookout 2 years ago. My mind started rewriting every interaction I'd ever had with her. The way she smiled when she saw me in the pews. The cookies she gave me after Sunday school. The time she cried quietly during my high school graduation and said it was just the hymns getting to her. It hadn't been the hymns. I closed the app. Suddenly, the quiet suburban life I'd built, the cul-de-sac barbecues, the stable job, the simple story I'd always told myself, felt paper thin. Had she given me up? Or had something else happened, and why had she stayed so close all these years? Watching. Waiting. If Marilyn Thomas was my mother, what had really happened 40 years ago, and what else had they lied about? Once you start looking backward, it's like your mind won't stop flipping pages. Suddenly, I was 8 again, sitting in the church pew, swinging my legs and trying not to fall asleep during the sermon. My parents were on either side of me, my adoptive father stiff and unreadable, my mother humming softly to herself. And just behind us, in the same spot every Sunday, sat Marilyn Thomas. She always wore something floral. Pink or lavender, usually with a scarf. I remember thinking she smelled like cinnamon and peppermint, like the bottom of an old purse. She never talked much, but she always smiled at me, softly, like she knew me. Not like the other church ladies who pinched cheeks and asked if I was eating enough. Her smiles were quieter. Sadder, maybe. I didn't understand it then. Now I couldn't stop thinking about it. How many times had she watched me sing in the children's choir? Sat 2 rows behind during my baptism? She'd even been there when I graduated high school, brought cupcakes to the reception in Fellowship Hall. Everyone said, "That's just Marilyn, always so sweet." But what if it wasn't sweetness? What if it was grief? I pulled out the old church directory from the hallway bookshelf, something I hadn't touched in decades. Her photo was there, 3 pages after mine. No husband listed. No kids. Just, Marilyn Thomas, records clerk, George Washington University, member since 1979. I stared at her picture for a long time. Then I flipped back to mine. The caption read, Samuel Thomas, adopted son of Richard and Thomas, joined 1984, same last name, coincidence, that's what I told myself. But the knot in my stomach said otherwise. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted there to be some mistake. Maybe she had the same name as my birth mother. Maybe the DNA kit glitched. But as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop, I knew the truth was too sharp to be accidental. She had been there all along, at school events, Christmas plays, Little League games. Watching, but never approaching. If she was my mother, why didn't she say anything? Was it shame? Guilt? Or had someone made sure she stayed silent? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how controlled everything had been. My adoption had always been vague, sealed records, no pictures, no contact. My parents had never talked about the process. And every time I asked questions growing up, they changed the subject. You're with us now. That's all that matters. But it wasn't, not anymore. I needed answers. Real ones. And I had a feeling Marilyn had been waiting 40 years for the same thing. My adoptive father, Richard Thomas, passed quietly in his sleep 6 months before I ever took the DNA test. The funeral had been clean and tight, just the way he liked his life, folded flags, pressed suits, closed doors. The garage, however, was another story. My mother had asked me to come by and help clear it out. There's too much junk, Sam, she said. Your father never threw anything away. I don't even know what half of it is. She was right. The place was a time capsule of rusted tools, old hunting gear, and unopened boxes stacked like forgotten sentinels. Dust floated in lazy beams through the grimy window. I wasn't expecting to find anything personal. But then I saw it, a wooden file box, cheap and splintered, wedged behind a water heater. The kind people use to stash birth certificates or insurance papers. I popped the latch, expecting tax records, but what I found was an envelope, yellowed with time, labeled in faint ink, Marilyn, final. My hands went still. Inside were 3 papers. The first was a notarized letter, dated February 1985, just months after I was adopted. It read, I, Marilyn Thomas, willingly relinquish all parental rights to my son, Samuel Thomas, for the good of his future. I do not wish to pursue custody or contact now or at any time in the future. The signature at the bottom was neat. Too neat. Almost like it had been traced. I held the letter up to the light. Something felt off. The ink, the language, none of it felt real. It read like a script. Like someone trying too hard to sound legally sound. I pulled out the second page. A court order, signed by a judge I didn't recognize, granting full guardianship to Richard and Thomas. Stamped and sealed. The third was a photocopy of what looked like medical records. A psychiatric evaluation. One line jumped out, Marilyn Thomas exhibits signs of emotional instability and may pose a risk to the child's long-term development. I sat down hard on the wooden step. The garage seemed to tilt sideways. None of this matched the woman I saw every Sunday. Quiet. Composed. Never once did she seem unwell or unhinged. And yet here it was, in black and white, a full character assassination, buried in a file box behind a heater. My father had kept it hidden. For decades, I knew in my gut this wasn't just adoption paperwork. It was evidence that Marilyn didn't walk away, evidence that someone, he, had made sure she never got close again. And now, after 40 years, I was holding the lie that built my entire life. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just folded the papers back into the envelope and walked out of the garage like I was carrying a loaded weapon, because in a way, I was. I used to wave at her. Every Sunday after church. When she'd leave the sanctuary with her soft steps and her scarf looped just so. Sometimes she'd hand me a peppermint. Other times, just a glance, a lingering look I always thought was kindness. Now, I wasn't so sure. After finding the forged letter and psychiatric report, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face the way it used to look when I was a child, soft, sad, like she wanted to say something but never could. That week, I stopped attending church. I told my wife I needed a break from the routine. What I didn't tell her was that I'd started following Marilyn. It felt wrong. Creepy, even. But I had to see for myself, if she really was the woman they said she was. If she really was my mother, Monday through Thursday, she kept to the same pattern. Left her townhouse at 7:45 a.m. Walked 3 blocks to the Safeway on Georgia Avenue. Bought the same items, bread, yogurt, a single can of soup. Always alone. No phone. No fuss. Friday morning, she went to the community center. I waited in my car, parked across the street, watching her through the glass windows. She sat in the back of a knitting circle, silent, half smiling. Her hands moved automatically. She wasn't really listening. That evening, I followed her again. This time, she took a different route home. Slower. Meandering. She paused outside a small playground and just stood there, watching the swing sway empty in the wind. Her arms were crossed tight, like she was holding something in. I knew then. She was remembering me. I watched her until she turned and went inside. I didn't sleep that night. I knew I couldn't wait much longer. The truth was pressing in from every side, those forged papers, my father's silence, the decades of looks I had misread. I had to talk to her. Confront her. Ask her what had really happened, but every time I imagined knocking on her door, my legs turned to stone. What would I even say? Hi. I think you're my mother and my entire life has been a lie. It felt absurd. And yet, completely true. I drove past her house 3 times the next day. The lights were on. Curtains drawn. The porch light flickering like it hadn't been changed in years. On the 4th drive-by, I pulled over, got out, walked halfway to the front steps, then froze, because just as I raised my hand to knock, the door opened, and there she was, standing in the doorway, as if she'd been waiting. Our eyes locked, and in that moment, I knew, she already knew who I was. Come inside, she whispered. I followed her through the narrow entryway of her townhouse. Everything smelled like old books and chamomile tea. Familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. We sat at a small kitchen table cluttered with unopened mail and a half-knitted shawl. She didn't offer tea. She didn't need to. You found me, she said, eyes fixed on her trembling hands. I did. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I watched the clock tick behind her, each second louder than the last. I knew this day would come, she said, her voice brittle. But I didn't know if I'd be alive for it. I pulled the envelope from my coat. Set it on the table. This, I said, tapping the letter. Isn't your signature, is it? Her eyes glistened. She didn't look at the paper. No. It's not. She reached for her scarf, gripping the ends like a lifeline. Then, slowly, she began. She'd met Richard Thomas in college. He was older, ambitious, charming in that political way DC men often are. She was 20, a freshman. He made her feel like the center of gravity. Then came his brother, Michael, quieter, warmer, easier to be around. He made me laugh, she said. Richard made me nervous. By the time she realized she was pregnant, she'd already broken things off with Richard. But Richard wasn't done with her. He said he'd help, she said. Said he'd support me if I told everyone the baby was his, not Michael's. He made it sound like the right thing to do. Said Michael wasn't fit to raise a child. I leaned forward, my pulse pounding. So I'm Michael's son. She nodded, And Richard, he took me from you?" She took a shaky breath. "When I refused to sign custody over to him and his wife, he told me I wasn't thinking clearly. That I'd regret it. Next thing I know, I'm being evaluated by a psychiatrist he knew. They said I had postpartum delusions. That I believed things that weren't true. That I was unfit." Her voice cracked. "They institutionalized me for 6 weeks. Sam. 6 weeks. When I got out, you were gone. I felt like I'd been thrown through glass. Everything I thought I knew, who I was, where I came from, was splintered. Why didn't you fight back?" I asked, though I hated myself for it. "I did," she said, eyes blazing. "I filed petitions. I contacted lawyers. But Richard had friends. Judges. He kept everything sealed. Told everyone I was unstable. And he made sure you were raised to never ask." I sat back, dizzy. He'd kept me close just to keep her silent. She reached across the table, her hand hovering over mine. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "I never stopped looking." I didn't know what to say. I couldn't even breathe, but I believed her, and now, I needed to make the man who destroyed both our lives answer for what he did. After that night in Marilyn's kitchen, I didn't sleep for 2 days. My mind was a wrecking ball swinging through every memory I had of my childhood, my father's rigid tone, the strange silences when I asked questions, the way Marilyn always seemed near but never involved, and now I knew why. He didn't just take me from her. He erased her. I started digging. First, I requested my sealed adoption file from the D.C. Family Court. They told me the records weren't accessible without a court order, standard policy. But I'd worked in accounting long enough to know how to navigate red tape. With the help of a lawyer friend, we filed for a judicial review citing new evidence. It took weeks, but I got what I needed. The file was thin, too thin. But inside was the original court ruling. The name stamped at the bottom made my blood chill. Judge Robert Ellicott. He'd been retired since the early 2000s but once held enormous sway in the family court circuit, known for his no-nonsense decisions and fast-track adoptions. A man of prestige. Respected. Unquestioned, my father had played golf with him. I remembered seeing his name in our living room guest book, back when I was 10. Attached to the file was a psychological evaluation, supposedly conducted at Washington Medical by a Dr. Martin Kell. The report claimed Marilyn had hallucinations, paranoia, and an inability to maintain coherent reasoning. But that wasn't the part that got me. The letterhead was off-center. The watermark was dated 1982, 3 years before the report was supposedly written, a forgery. I tracked down the real Dr. Kell. He was retired and living in Richmond. I called him. He didn't remember Marilyn Thomas. Never treated her. Never signed that report, and he was willing to go on the record. My heart thudded like a war drum. It was all a setup. My father had used his connections, Judge Ellicott and a fake psych eval, to label Marilyn mentally unfit, making the adoption appear clean on paper. And everyone played along. I wasn't just adopted. I was stolen, raised in a lie, and I knew now that my father had done it not out of love for me, but out of pure vengeance, for Marilyn rejecting him and for Michael, the brother he couldn't control. I thought about my real father, Michael. I didn't even know if he was alive. Marilyn hadn't seen him in decades. But one thing was clear, my adoptive father had built his life, and mine, on forged signatures, silenced voices, and destroyed lives, and now I had proof. It was time someone else saw it, too. He was sitting in the sunroom when I arrived, a paperback in one hand and a tumbler of whiskey in the other. The same way I remembered him from every Sunday growing up, calm, polished, untouchable. "Samuel," he said without looking up. "You're early." I wasn't planning to stay long. He finally glanced at me, eyes narrowed with that familiar calculation. "Something wrong?" I pulled the manila envelope from my coat and tossed it onto the glass table between us. It landed with a flat thud. Scattering condensation from his glass. "What's this?" he asked, though he already knew, proof. He picked it up slowly, leafed through the court papers, the psychiatric eval, the DNA report, the notarized forgery. No emotion. Not even a twitch. Where did you find these? He asked. In your garage. In the folder marked, Marilyn, final. He chuckled softly and set the envelope down, sipping his drink like we were discussing weather. I always knew you'd get curious one day. I spoke to her, I said. She never gave me up. You destroyed her life. He didn't flinch. Just leaned back in the wicker chair and said, I saved yours. My hands clenched. You lied. You stole me. You had her committed, made sure no court would listen, all because, what? She wouldn't be with you? He sighed, like a teacher disappointed with a student who hadn't studied. She was unstable. Emotional. Dramatic. I gave you stability. A future. You should be thanking me. You're unbelievable, I said, reaching into my pocket and tapping the voice recorder on my phone. You think that sounds like justice? I think it sounds like perspective. He leaned forward. You got an education. A house. A family. She would have raised you in a one-bedroom walk-up. Probably on welfare. She loved me, I snapped. You didn't even love me, you just wanted to win. There was a long silence. For the first time, I saw it, just a flicker, something hollow behind his eyes. You always reminded me of him, he said quietly. Michael. The way you looked at people like you already knew who they were. Michael was my real father, wasn't he? He nodded. Slowly. She was supposed to be mine. He ruined that. I took back what he stole. It hit me then, he hadn't raised me because he wanted a son. He'd raised me because he wanted to punish his brother. You didn't raise me out of love, I said. You raised me out of revenge. He didn't answer. I stood up, heart hammering. I'm going public with this. The papers, the recording, everyone will know what you did. He smirked. Go ahead. No one cares about old stories. Least of all ones with happy endings. This isn't your ending, I said. It's hers. And mine, because now I had the truth, and I wasn't afraid to use it. I didn't sleep the night I leaked the story. Just watched the sky shift from bruised purple to gunmetal gray, waiting for the world to catch fire. The journalist's name was Talia Reyes, a local reporter with a reputation for taking on stories most people were too afraid to touch. She met me in a quiet coffee shop in DuPont Circle, leaned over a black Americano, and listened without blinking as I laid out 40 years of betrayal like pieces on a chessboard. I gave her everything, the forged psychiatric eval, the falsified signature, the old court ruling, the voice recording, and finally, Marilyn. Talia insisted on meeting her. I sat beside Marilyn at her kitchen table as she answered questions with trembling dignity, pulling out boxes of old paperwork, rejection letters, and the letter she wrote in 1992 that never made it past the court clerk's desk. Talia's hands shook as she packed away her recorder. They buried you, she whispered. No, Marilyn said gently. He did. The article dropped 2 weeks later, The Stolen Son of Suburban D.C., Adoption, Forgery, and a Judge's Dirty Legacy. It exploded. It started with local news, then regional stations picked it up. By the end of the week, national outlets were calling. People wanted interviews. Panels. Podcasts. Everyone had a question about the boy raised by his mother's enemy, and the woman who had waited, for blocks away, for her truth to matter. The fallout came hard and fast. Judge Ellicott, long retired, was suddenly back in headlines. 3 other families came forward with eerily similar stories. A task force was assembled to review dozens of adoption cases from the early 80s. The psychiatrist, Dr. Kell, released a statement denying any involvement. The evaluation was declared fraudulent, and Richard Thomas, my adoptive father, found his legacy collapsing in real time. The veterans groups distanced themselves. His name was stripped from the local community center he helped fund. Former law partners ghosted him, and me, I gave one interview. Just one, I said. My life wasn't built on a second chance. It was built on someone else's silence. And now, that silence is broken. Marilyn didn't cry the day the investigation officially cleared her name. She just stood in her front yard, the sun lighting up her silver hair, and said, "I'm free." But freedom is a strange thing after 4 decades of waiting. Some days she smiles like she's 20 again. Other days, she stares out her window, watching children pass by, wondering what she missed. I sit with her on those days. Quietly, because healing doesn't happen overnight, and justice, real justice, never comes clean. But now the world knows the truth, and the man who built his life on a stolen child, he gets to live with the echo of what he tried to erase. Me, my father didn't speak to me again, not after the article. Not after the fallout, not after the community center stripped his name from its marble wall like peeling paint. He stayed in his house, blinds drawn, whiskey poured deeper every week. I heard from a neighbor he stopped showing up at the VFW, stopped answering calls. Someone said he'd aged 10 years in one. Good, but I didn't do it to break him. I did it so he couldn't rewrite the ending. He'd told his version for 40 years, that he saved a child, that Marilyn was unfit, that I should be grateful. He buried the truth so deep it nearly choked us all. But truth is patient, it waits in dusty file boxes, it hides in trembling voices, it outlives silence. When Talia's follow-up article dropped, The Reckoning of Richard Thomas, I didn't read it right away. I already knew what it said. Instead, I went to the one place he'd never expect to find me, his front porch. I didn't knock. I left a copy of the newspaper on the welcome mat, tucked into the envelope where I'd once stored the forged documents, the voice recording, the photo of me and Marilyn from our first dinner together after the truth came out. On top, I wrote 5 words, "This is the truth now." No threats. No rage. Just clarity. I walked away before he opened the door. I never turned around. Some ghosts deserve no audience. Marilyn cried when she saw the final report exonerating her. We sat on her porch in the cool light of fall, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes in tight circles. She held the paper to her chest like it might disappear if she blinked. "Do you regret anything?" I asked. She took a long breath. "Only that I couldn't raise you." But I never stopped watching. And I never stopped being watched, I thought. It was strange, how what once unnerved me now felt like a kind of love. In time, I found peace. Not the kind that comes with revenge, but the kind that grows slowly when the lies are gone and the silence has finally been filled with names. Voices, stories. I started writing them down, my story, Marilyn's, Michael's, the ones they tried to erase. Because this isn't just about me, it's about the truth we're owed, the blood that connects us, and the legacy we leave when we finally stop pretending the past can't touch us. My father gave me his name, but I reclaimed something greater, my beginning, and this time, no one gets to take it from me. If this story made you stop and think, even for a second, about the secrets families keep and the power of truth, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. What would you do if you found out your entire life was built on a lie? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, and remember, sometimes, the truth isn't buried, it's just waiting for someone brave enough to dig.